First story. The man behind the cedar fence. It all began in late September, in a quiet suburb outside of Tacoma, Washington. The leaves had just begun to turn, and the evening air carried that unmistakable scent of pine and cold soil. Our neighborhood was peaceful, the kind of place where people left their garage doors open during the day and waved to each other from across the street. But everything changed when he moved in across the road. The house had sat empty for nearly 2 years, a 2-story colonial with chipped white paint and a sagging porch. No one wanted it. Rumors said it was foreclosed after the last owner disappeared without a trace. One morning, I saw a U-Haul parked in the driveway and a tall, pale man unloading boxes. No introductions, no small talk, just silent movements and that strange wooden crate he carried like it weighed nothing. I watched from my window as he installed a 7-foot cedar fence around the entire property, something no one else in the neighborhood had. When I waved at him the next day, he didn't wave back. He just stared. Creepy guy, my wife said over dinner. Maybe he's just private. But there was something off. At night, lights flickered behind the windows, even though I never saw him turn them on. Strange smells, metallic, almost burnt, wafted over to our porch. And then there were the sounds. One night, around 2 in the morning, I heard a high-pitched whine. Not a dog, not a tool. Something else. I went outside and saw movement behind his fence. Just shadows and a soft thud. Then, nothing. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe stress, maybe paranoia. But then my neighbor Kathy, who jogged every morning at 5, stopped by shaking. There was a man standing in the street last night, she said. Right in the middle. He didn't move, just stared at me as I ran by. Was it him? I asked. I think so. But his face, it looked wrong. I started keeping notes, times, sounds, lights. Every night I'd hear scratching on metal, sometimes whimpering, and more than once, a deep, low voice chanting something I couldn't understand. Then came the animals. First, someone's cat, then 2 dogs, then raccoons and squirrels, dead, mangled, left in neat piles outside his gate. We called animal control. They investigated. They never came back. One night, I snapped. I grabbed a flashlight, hopped the back fence, and crept through the woods behind his house. I needed to know. The air was cold, damp. I crept along the cedar fence, heart pounding. I found a loose plank near the back and pushed it open just enough to peek in. The backyard was covered in symbols, carved into the dirt, marked in ash. Everywhere. Skulls, ribs, spines, arranged in spirals. And in the center of it all, him. He stood motionless, arms outstretched. The crate sat in front of him, open, and something, long and wet, slithered out of it. I gasped. He turned. Our eyes met. And suddenly, I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an icy hand. He smiled. I don't remember getting home, but I woke up in my bed, covered in mud. My wife said I was screaming in my sleep. The next day, the house across the street was empty again. No moving truck. No signs of life. The fence was gone. The grass looked untouched, as if no one had ever lived there. But every night since then, I hear the scratching. Sometimes on the walls, sometimes under the bed. The walls know what I heard. I moved into apartment 4B of the Maple Grove complex in Syracuse, New York, after my divorce. It was supposed to be a fresh start. Quiet, boring, predictable. The building was old, sure, but it had charm. The red brick walls, creaky floorboards, and vintage radiators gave it a strange warmth. My neighbors seemed friendly enough, especially the couple in 4A, Eric and Marlene Caldwell. Mid-30s, polite, always together. Maybe 2 together. The walls in that building were paper thin. I heard them laugh, argue, make up, and even cry. It didn't bother me at first. It made the place feel alive. But then the sounds changed. One night, late October, just after midnight, I woke up to a low thud, then a dragging sound, then silence. I pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing. The next morning, I bumped into Eric in the hallway. He smiled, said good morning. But something was off. His clothes looked rumpled. His hands were trembling slightly. Marlene didn't say a word. She just stood behind him, staring. That's when the noises started becoming more disturbing. Every night, around 2 a.m., I'd hear whispering. Not arguing. Whispers. Murmuring that I couldn't quite make out. I started recording it on my phone. When I played it back, there were gaps in the audio. Whole sections were silent, even though I knew I heard something at the time. Then came the scratching. At first, it sounded like rats. But it moved with intelligence, slow at first, then fast, like it knew I was listening. Once, I put my palm flat against the wall, and I swear something tapped back. Not random, 3 steady taps. I asked around. The elderly woman in 3B told me something strange. "You're in 4B? That place is cursed," she whispered. "They come and go, but someone always disappears." I laughed it off, until Marlene vanished. Eric claimed she left him, ran off with someone she met online, but her clothes, her car, her dog, all still there. I started to hear her voice at night, behind the wall, crying, whispering, calling my name. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I knocked on their door. Eric answered, calm as ever. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Where's Marlene?" I asked. He smiled. "Why don't you come in?" I stepped inside. The apartment smelled wrong, sweet and rotten at the same time. There was plastic over the furniture, tarp in the corner, a hammer on the counter. "I think she's still here," I said, heart pounding. Eric just looked at me. "She is," he said. Then he lunged. I blacked out. I woke up in my bathtub. My head was bleeding. The door to my apartment was wide open. I crawled to my phone, called the cops. They found nothing in 4A. No tarp, no hammer, no trace of Marlene. Eric had vanished, but the sounds didn't stop. Last night, I heard scratching again. Then a whisper, "Help me." The wall behind my bed feels soft, like the plaster isn't real anymore. I think she's still there. And now I think he is too. Third story, she kept knocking even after she died. When I first moved into apartment 12B at the edge of Haverhill, Massachusetts, I was just looking for peace, quiet evenings. No surprises, no drama. But that changed the day I met my neighbor, Mrs. Adeline Grover. She lived in 12A, right next to me. An old lady, maybe in her late 80s. Thin, hunched over, always wearing a pale green housecoat. Her voice cracked like dry leaves when she greeted me with a simple, "You're new." I always know when someone moves in. At first, I didn't think much of her. A little odd, sure, but harmless. That was until I started noticing strange things. The knocking began the first Friday after I moved in. 3 knocks. Always 3. Sharp, slow, deliberate. It was midnight the first time. Knock, knock, knock. I opened the door. No one. The hallway was empty. Still. Cold. The next night, the same thing. Midnight. Knock, knock, knock. But this time when I opened the door, she was standing there. Just standing. Silent. "Mrs. Grover?" She smiled slowly. Her teeth were yellow, crooked. I just wanted to say goodnight. It became a routine. Every night at midnight. 3 knocks. And her standing there with that strange, slow smile. I tried to be polite. I offered to bring her groceries, help her with mail, but she always said no. She only wanted to say goodnight. Then, one night, she didn't knock. I thought she might be sick. I knocked on her door the next morning. No answer. I went to the landlord. He blinked at me, confused. "Adeline Grover? Sir, she's been dead for 3 years." "That's impossible," I said. "She lives right next to me. She knocked every night." He took out his phone and showed me a news article. She died in her apartment, heart attack, alone. No one found her for days. I went back to my place, thinking it was some kind of cruel joke. But that night, she knocked again. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't open the door. Then she began whispering through the door. Words I couldn't understand at first. Soft, then louder, then screaming. "Let me in! I know you're there, I know!" I moved a chair against the door. I stayed up all night. The next day I packed, told the landlord I was breaking my lease. I couldn't stay. But as I was walking down the hall with my last box, I glanced back. Her door was open, and she was standing there. "You can leave," she said, "but I'm not done with you." I moved to Chicago, changed my number, new job, new life. But sometimes late at night, wherever I am, I still hear it. Knock, 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 knock. And once I opened the door, she was there, smiling. "Good night," she whispered, and vanished. But now the knocking happens every night. Different cities, different apartments. She always finds me, because I opened the door. Fourth story, the house with no goodbye. It all began one muggy Thursday evening in early August. I had just moved into a quiet little cul-de-sac in suburban Arizona, Cactus Ridge, a peaceful place where people kept their lawns trimmed, waved at each other politely, and seemed to vanish inside their homes after sunset. I wasn't looking for trouble. I just wanted a fresh start. After my divorce, the silence was comforting, but something was off about the neighbors across the street, the Wrights. An elderly man, a middle-aged woman, and a boy who looked maybe 10, but never spoke a word. I never saw them leave for work or school or anything, really. Their lights flickered strangely every night, and there was always a low humming noise coming from their garage. One evening, I saw the boy standing completely still in their driveway. He wasn't looking at anything, just standing, staring. I waved. He didn't move, not even a blink. Then, without warning, he turned around and walked backward into the garage as the door slowly rolled down behind him. I tried not to think about it. Weeks passed. I kept to myself. But then, my cat disappeared. I printed flyers, knocked on doors. No one had seen her. When I reached the Wrights' house, I noticed something strange. Behind their screen door, I saw dozens of what looked like tiny collars. Animal collars. I asked about them, but the middle-aged woman only smiled and said, "Things find their way here when they're meant to." One night, after a long shift at work, I pulled into my driveway and noticed my front door slightly ajar. I knew I had locked it. I grabbed the tire iron from my trunk and stepped inside. My living room was untouched. My bedroom? Normal. But then I opened the hallway closet. Inside, taped to the wall, was a picture of me, sleeping. The date written on it was that morning. I ran outside, straight to the Wrights. I didn't care about being polite anymore. I pounded on the door, yelling, "What is wrong with you people?" The door creaked open, but no one was there. I stepped inside. The air was thick. The humming noise grew louder. The hallway was lined with photographs, not of people, but parts of people. Eyes, mouths, hands, all labeled. I stumbled back, heart pounding. Something moved in the corner of my eye, a shadow, darting down the hallway. Then the door slammed shut behind me. "You shouldn't have come here," a voice whispered. I ran. Through the kitchen, past the dining room. All the windows were boarded from the inside. In the basement doorframe stood the old man, his mouth stitched shut, his eyes wide and red. I shoved him, ran up the stairs, and suddenly I was outside, gasping for air. But my relief didn't last. When I got back to my house, all my windows were dark. The power was out. My phone was gone. The only light came from across the street, from the Wrights. In every window, they stood, watching, smiling. The next day, their house was gone, completely. Just empty land where it once stood, like it never existed. But in my mailbox was a note. "You belong here now. Welcome to the neighborhood." Fifth story, the whispers that came from a dead man's door. It started with the smell, not the kind you forget after a few minutes. It was sharp, like old meat left in the sun, mixed with something metallic, almost like rusted coins soaked in bleach. I lived on Briar Hill Lane, just outside of Eugene, Oregon. Small cul-de-sac. Quiet neighbors, retired teachers, a firefighter, a couple in their 50s who bred poodles. That's why the smell stood out. It was coming from 4B, Mr. Gerald Thompson's house. He hadn't been seen in days, but no one really thought much of it. He was in his 80s, hard of hearing, always bundled in the same faded blue jacket, even in summer. My dad used to say, "That man's been on borrowed time since Bush was in office." I decided to check on him. The door was slightly open. "Mr. Thompson?" I called, standing just outside. Nothing. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me full force. My stomach twisted, my mouth filled with saliva, and I had to cover my face with my hoodie. I took a step inside. That's when I heard the whisper. "Help?" I froze. It was weak, raspy, but clear. "Mr. Thompson?" I said again. No answer. The living room was dark. The curtains were drawn shut. Piles of newspapers stacked along the walls, plates with old food. A trail of something black and sticky led from the hallway to the bedroom. I followed it. The bedroom door was open just a crack. From inside, I could hear breathing, slow, wet, labored. I pushed the door. The room was pitch black. Then a voice, clearer this time, "Don't let him leave." I turned. No one. I reached for the light switch. Nothing. But in the darkness, I saw it, a faint shape, hunched over, sitting in the corner. "Mr. Thompson?" I whispered. It lifted its head. His face was wrong, bloated, skin gray and splitting, one eye cloudy white. The other, it blinked. "He's not me anymore," it said in a voice not his own. I ran. Down the hallway, through the living room, out the door. I didn't stop until I was halfway down the street. I called the cops. When they went inside, they found his body, dead for over 5 days. Impossible, I said. I heard him. He spoke to me. They said decomposition was advanced. No way he was talking. But I knew what I saw. That night, I heard the whisper again, from my closet. He's not done with you. I locked my door. Didn't sleep. The next morning, there was a knock at my door. A note had been slipped underneath. You opened the door. Now you have to shut it. I moved out 2 days later, sold everything. But it didn't end. 3 towns later, 2 states over, the same note appeared under my motel room door. Now you have to shut it. And sometimes late at night, I hear that voice behind me in the dark. Don't let him leave. But I already did. And I think he followed me. No one believes me. No one will. But listen, if you smell something strange from the house next door, don't open the door. Because the thing you let out, it never dies.